Hi everyone, today we're going to cover the classes of hormones. So first of all, according to the chemical structure, we're going to discuss the three classes of the hormone. So what are the three classes? First is protein, then you have steroids, and the other is derivatives of amino acid, and particularly which amino acid, tyrosine. So proteins and polypeptides. What's the difference between the two? Protein is obviously a longer chain. Polypeptide is a shorter chain. Proteins they have amino acid of let's say about equal to or more than 100, and polypeptides they have amino acid less than 100. So that's just basic information. You do not even need to know that as such. So proteins and polypeptides, what falls under this category? So everything that starts with P's, because there's a lot of P's that we're talking about currently. So pituitary hormones, all the pituitary hormones, anterior and posterior, all the ones that we studied here, anterior hormones and the posterior hormones, all of them fall under this category of proteins. And when you talk about the next next P, that is pancreas, insulin and glucagon, that is secreted by pancreas, and then parathyroid hormone, parathyroid from the parathyroid gland. So these are proteins. I hope that's clear. Oops. And then we have steroids. This is the second category. Now in steroids, we have, I'm sure you already know, estrogen and progesterone and testosterone, and then placenta also secretes estrogen and progesterone, right? So these are steroids. This is something we all know, right? So again, ovary secretes estrogen and progesterone, and even the placenta secretes the same. Testes secretes testosterone. Now we also have to include adrenal cortex, but how will you remember this? That this is also steroid. We have to remember this in this fashion that adrenal cortex is basically remember, I told you adrenal cortex has, first of all, mineralocorticoids, then it has glucocorticoids, and then adrenal cortex also secretes adrenal androgens. So when you talk about androgens, in androgens we had what exactly? We had uh, your estrogen and testosterone. So estrogen and testosterone, it fell under this category of androgens. Let me just show you this right here. Androgens, estrogen, and testosterone, not progesterone. So remember now, since we're talking about all the estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, why would we leave the adrenal androgen? So adrenal androgen is secreted by adrenal cortex. So it's important to include adrenal cortex also in the steroid category. So adrenal cortex, you have aldosterone, cortisol, and androgens. Now, derivatives of amino acid, particularly tyrosine, so we are left with the adrenal medulla, right? So adrenal medulla, epinephrine and norepinephrine, these are catecholamines, and then the thyroid, thyroxine, and triiodothyronine. Triiodothyronine is T3 and thyroxine is T4. Protein greater than or equal to 100 amino acid, peptide less than 100 amino acid. But there are some hormones, for example, thyrotropin releasing hormone. Now, releasing hormone, so this is from the hypothalamus. It has three amino acids, whereas growth hormone, this is from anterior pituitary, and prolactin also from anterior pituitary. They have 200 amino acids, so that's their length. Now, when you talk about synthesis of the peptide hormone, so these are synthesized on the rough end of the endoplasmic reticulum, the rough endoplasmic reticulum, and they're secreted as pre-pro hormones. This is the larger hormone. Now, these pre-pro hormones, they go where exactly they go? They're still in the endoplasmic reticulum. So, in the endoplasmic reticulum itself, the pre-pro hormones they are cleaved into pro hormones, which are smaller hormones. These pro hormones then they go to the Golgi apparatus. In the Golgi apparatus, they are packaged into secretory vesicles and they are stored as in two forms. They're cleaved and they're stored in two forms. One is the inactive fragment and the other is the active hormone. So this is within the vesicle. And these vesicles are then either stored in the cytoplasm or they're bound to the membrane. So that's the peptide hormones. Then secretion of the peptide hormone is done in either of the two, there are either of the two stimuli for it. One is increased cytosolic calcium concentration, the other would be increased stimulation of cell surface receptors. So we have cell surface receptors. So there, either if a hormone comes and attaches to the receptor, that could potentially increase the production of CAMP, and that would result in increased production of protein kinase A, and excess of that hormone would be released, produced, and released. Now, peptide hormones, the one thing about them is that they are water soluble. Steroid hormones, they are lipid soluble. So now we know the peptide hormones are all those which are released by the hypothalamus and the pituitary, particularly the pituitary gland, not hypothalamus. Just we have to say pituitary gland, then pancreas, and then the parathyroid hormone. And steroid are all those which are secreted by adrenal cortex and then testes and placenta and ovaries. Now, imine hormones are thyroid hormones and adrenal medullary, which are catecholamines. Now, how are they synthesized and how are they stored? Now, their synthesis, They're made from amino acids. That's one thing that's synthesized then and there from amino acids. But thyroid hormones, these are stored in thyroid gland, and they are never free. They have to have some binding force with them. So they have thyroglobulin, and upon secretion, when they're left to roam freely in the bloodstream, they bind to the thyroxine binding globulin. Now, medullary hormones, which are epinephrine and norepinephrine, they are again this produced in the adrenal medulla and they're stored in vesicles. So these are slightly different. They're stored in vesicles, just like the protein hormones. The protein hormones are also stored in vesicles mostly. So these are also stored in vesicles, and then they're released in the blood in free form, just like protein hormones. Hormones are also stored in the vesicles, and then they're released in the blood in the free form. So this is the epinephrine and norepinephrine. And then the next thing, very important, transport of hormones. Now, water-soluble hormones, which are peptides and also catecholamines, will come under this classification because peptides are also stored in vesicle, catecholamines are also stored in vesicle, and both can roam around freely because they're water-soluble. So peptides and catecholamines. So from the catecholamine, this is amino acid derivative, right? So we're left with thyroid. So thyroid also comes, thyroid and steroid, they have the same mechanism for transportation and catecholamines. So we have basically divided which category. We're dividing the amino acid tyrosine derivatives, right? So they had catecholamines and thyroid hormones. We have divided these thyroid hormone and steroid hormone. We have grouped them together and they bind with the plasma proteins and then they uh, roam freely in the blood. That's how they are transported. Thyroid hormone, it binds with the thyroxine binding globulin. And steroid hormones also have to bind to some sort of plasma protein. Water soluble hormones, on the other hand, are peptides and catecholamines. Do not forget the catecholamines. These are also secreted in the vesicles. Now, peptides, yes. So dissolve in plasma and they're free to roam around. And when they reach the target tissue capillary, they move into the interstitial fluid and then the target cell eventually. Another thing about those which are transported bound to plasma proteins, their clearance is sort of difficult because it's difficult to obviously destruct the plasma protein and then clear it. So their clearance is difficult. Peptide hormones and catecholamines move freely in blood, easy to clear because they take very little time. They're degraded by enzymes and excreted by kidneys and liver. Steroid hormones and thyroid hormones, on the other hand, these bind with plasma proteins in the blood. This is why it takes a lot more time for them to be cleared. Now, another very important thing is the location for receptors. So we have peptide and catecholamines. The receptors are normally placed on the cell membrane. Steroid hormones receptors are roaming in the cytoplasm within the cell, and thyroid hormones, their receptors are in the nucleus.